Back in the 1980s, Jacksonville wasn't the clean, polished city you see today. Nah, it was wild. The streets were alive with money, guns, ambition, and danger. It was the kind of place where dreams and death were separated by one bad decision. And right in the middle of that storm was one man, Henry Mann. His name didn't just ring bells. It commanded silence. If you were in the game back then, you either respected him, envied him, or wanted to be him. But one thing's for sure, you never ignored him, see? Henry wasn't a corner boy. He was a thinker, a strategist, the kind of man who watched before he moved. He used to stand outside nightclubs, watching the old school hustlers pull up in a Benz, the Miami boys showing off gold chains, and fast talk about the packs they moved. Henry didn't want to work for anyone. He wanted to be the one they worked for. And that's exactly what he became. He started taking quiet trips down to South Florida, not for the beaches, but for business. He'd drive down to Opelika or Carroll City, buy a few keys, and come back up to Jacksonville with enough product to make half the city rich. That's how it all began. Smart, quiet, and calculated. Like a man who already knew what he was building long before anyone else saw it. When the crack era hit full force, Henry was already ready. His system was tight. He bought coke straight from South Florida, cooked it into crack back home, and ran it through a network of about 30 dealers. But these weren't random street kids. These were his people, cousins, childhood friends, and even a few loyal dudes. He'd pulled out of poverty, each one had their own corner, and every week they kicked up to Henry. Together, they controlled nearly 30% of Jacksonville's entire drug flow, pulling in over $10 million a year. That was real money in the 1980s, the kind that could buy entire blocks. As the money rolled in, Henry got flashy. He'd pull up to the car wash with 10 cars deep behind him, music blasting, handing out cash to kids and workers. One week, he was in a Benz, the next in a Jeep, because he once bought 30 Jeeps for his crew just to show off. If you were in Henry's circle, you didn't walk, you floated. People still talk about the time he shut down a whole car dealership. Walked in with a duffel bag, told the salesman, "I'm not here to talk credit, I'm here to talk cash." Within an hour, he'd bought 7 cars, 1 for himself, 6 for his lieutenants. That's how Henry moved. Loud enough for the streets to feel him, but quiet enough that the feds were always one step behind. What made Henry different wasn't just his hustle, it was his loyalty. He didn't want to be the only one shining. He wanted his whole team to eat. If you worked for Henry, you were eating good. He threw massive cookouts, his whole crew pulling up with bags of cash, jewelry, and clothes. He used to tell them, "You keep the money coming in, I'll keep you shining." And he meant it. Back then, everyone in Henry's crew was balling. Cars, girls, houses. Not like today, where one man's rich and everyone else is broke. Henry understood the real meaning of being a boss. Reward your soldiers, and they'll stay loyal. But with success comes hate. The streets got jealous. Some couldn't stand how fast he rose. Others hated that he didn't need them. And of course, the cops despised him, because to them, Henry was the face of everything they were trying to stop. Every time they busted another dealer, Henry's name popped up somewhere in the chain. He became an obsession. Now, Henry wasn't dumb. He knew how fast the feds could snatch everything. So he never trusted banks or even family with his real money. His stash game was legendary. He hid money in trap houses, under old cars, inside furniture, even behind drywall. From the outside, his spots looked run down. But inside, you might find $500,000 under a couch. One time, one of his runners got sloppy and hid 80 grand under a kitchen sink. A few weeks later, gone. When Henry heard about it, he didn't even get mad. He just said, if it wasn't meant to come back, it wasn't mine to begin with. That was his mindset. Cold, calm, businesslike. He carried around 40 or 50 grand like it was pocket change. Rubber banded tight, one stack in each pocket, another in the glove compartment. That wasn't flexing. That was operating cash. He paid rent at multiple apartments, one for meetings, one for stashing, and one to disappear if things got hot. That's how you survive 10 million a year in the middle of a crack war. Then came the photo. Cops got their hands on a picture of Henry holding $100,000 cash, smiling like a man who owned the city. They pinned it up in the Jacksonville Police Department, their little trophy. But to the streets, that picture was proof that Henry really lived it. In the 1980s, 100 grand wasn't just money, it was power, it was respect. But the game don't love nobody. By 1988, the feds were on him heavy. Wiretaps, stakeouts, the whole nine. The same flash that made him a legend was now making him a target. When they finally came for him, they came hard. Trafficking, conspiracy, money laundering. They stacked it all. The papers called him Jacksonville's cocaine kingpin. The city went silent. Deep down, everyone knew Henry was the man who made Jacksonville money. He took a plea, did his time, and walked out in 2007. But when he came home, the world had changed. His old blocks were gone, and the new generation didn't even know his name. He tried legit work construction, mechanic jobs, but nothing stuck. It's hard to go from making millions to making hundreds. That kind of fall hurts. Still, that hunger never dies. In 2012, Henry met a woman who claimed she had a Mexican connect offering kilos for $26,000 apiece. But it was all a setup. The woman was an undercover cop, the man with her a DEA agent. Henry said he couldn't afford a whole kilo. He scraped together half the money, even offering his car title as collateral. Imagine that, a man who once made 10 million a year, now pawning his car just to feel that rush again. When they met again to finalize the deal, the feds moved in. Henry Mann was arrested on the spot, and in 2012, sentenced to 15 more years in federal prison. That's the game. It lifts you up like a god, then drops you back to earth like you never mattered. One day you're feeding a whole city. The next, you're just another name in the system. Henry Mann's story is more than a tale about money and power. It's a lesson about greed, loyalty, and the price of never letting go. He once ran Jacksonville, made 10 million a year. Fed families built legends, but in the end, the streets took it all back. Like Jadakiss said, I know ex-kingpins working at Walgreens. That's real talk. For every man who thought he was untouchable, there's a story like Henry Mann, the king who had it all, lost it all, and couldn't stop chasing the feeling of being on top one last time. Because back then, when Henry ruled the city, everybody ate. For a few wild years, Jacksonville belonged to him. Henry Mann's story doesn't just fade into history. It lingers like the ghost of a time when the streets were louder, rawer, and more dangerous. When you talk to the old heads in Jacksonville, you'll still hear his name whispered in barbershops and pool halls. They'll tell you how the city felt different when Henry was around. The money was moving, people were eating. And even though it came from the wrong hustle, there was structure, a strange kind of order in the chaos. They'll say, man, when Henry was out, folks were straight, and that's the truth. For a while, he kept a lot of people fed who otherwise would have gone hungry. But that's the thing about the game, it never tells you when it's over. It just stops loving you one day. When Henry came back out in 2007, he wasn't the same man who once owned the streets. The city had moved on. The old corners were gentrified, his old players locked up, and the ones who were free had turned into family men, trying to leave that life behind. The new generation didn't care about history. They only respected what they could see. To them, Henry was just another old-timer, talking about the good days. That kind of silence, that kind of invisibility, it breaks a man who used to make millions just by picking up the phone. He tried to stay straight. He really did. But when you've lived like a king, it's hard to live like a common man. The hunger don't fade. It just hides until the right temptation walks in. And that's exactly what happened in 2012. That setup wasn't just a sting. It was a test of whether Henry could resist being Henry Mann again. He couldn't, because deep down, he missed that feeling. The rush of the deal, the weight of the cash, the power of being the man everyone called boss. It wasn't even about money anymore. It was about identity, about feeling alive in a world that had forgotten his name. But the streets don't do second chances. They'll let you relive the moment just long enough to destroy you with it. So when those DEA agents slapped the cuffs on him in 2012, it wasn't just another arrest. It was the end of an era, the last chapter of a man who tried to outrun time itself. 15 more years. That's what he got. 15 more years to think about the choices that built him and broke him. And here's the cold truth. Henry Mann wasn't evil. He was just a product of his time, a man who saw opportunity where others saw risk, who built an empire out of chaos and thought loyalty could outlast greed. He proved one thing, though: power without peace is poison. Henry's story is a mirror held up to every hustler who ever thought they could beat the system. It's a reminder that no matter how much you make, how far you go, or how many people you feed, the streets don't owe you anything. They'll take back every dollar, every car, every ounce of fame, and leave you with memories of what used to be. And maybe that's the saddest part. Not the time he did, not the money he lost, but the way the world forgot his name. Because there was a time when Henry Mann ran Jacksonville. He was the reason lights stayed on in houses, food stayed on tables, and people had hope, even if it came from the wrong place. He was the city's first real kingpin and its first big fall. Now his legend lives on only in whispers. A photo on a police board, a story told over drinks, a faded memory of a man who once turned the streets of Jacksonville into his own personal kingdom. So if you take anything from Henry's story, let it be this: the game doesn't have winners, just survivors. And even they don't last forever, because every kingdom built on the streets comes with the same price tag: loyalty, greed, and time. Henry Mann paid all three. For a few golden years, he owned the city, and for the rest of his life, the city owned him. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment. Who should I do the next video about?